This podcast may contain inaccurate information, bad language, and spoilers.
When life gets you down, your car just won't start.
Agony art.
It's time for agony art. If you've reached a dead end, you're not sure what to do.
Agony art.
Well, agony art is for you. At times life is grand, you've got the world in your hands. Then somehow you drop that ball.
Drop that ball.
Instead of watching it fall, give agony art a call.
Welcome to Agony Art, the Agony Aunt podcast in which we try to solve your problems not using our own brain power, no way, but instead by telling you how those problems were solved in the great art of our age. And when we inevitably fail to solve those problems, at least you're left with a fun reading, listening and watching list to enjoy in your spare time. My name's Aaron. I'm an author. And I can't speak very quickly without tripping over my words. And I've got Carl, our film fan, and Liam, our music maestro, mogul, magnate, here with me in our online studio because we could not get together. Say hello, lads, remotely.
Hello, lads, remotely.
Remotely, hello lads. What's that song, Liam? Let's get together.
Let's get it
now.
on.
Oh yeah, in sweet harmony.
I
Know
don't
that
know
one?
this song, Cole.
Yeah, Aaron, you know, don't you?
Yeah.
People all over the
Let's come
world.
together right now. Oh yeah,
Start a love
sweet
train.
harmony.
Yeah.
Now, lads, today is December the 1st.
Is it?
Do you know when episode 1 of series 1 of Agony Art was released?
September the 27th, 1992.
Was it? Was it the 1st of December 2019?
The 2nd of December
Oh,
2020. As of tomorrow, Agony Art is 1 year old.
Wait, did we only release in 2020?
Yeah.
Really?
Oh.
Happy birthday, lads.
Happy birthday.
What have you got me?
Happy birthday to you.
What would you say are the highlights? I tried to get Davina McCall in to give us our highlights reel, but
I reckon it was the break in between seasons.
it was my favourite bit because
Well,
I didn't have any prep to do.
I think that the season 2 getaway, that was a bit of a highlight. I mean, the listeners won't really know much about that, but we squirreled ourselves away in a home away from home.
We did mention it on the podcast, didn't we, that we were in a secret location. The problem was getting to that underground bunker, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's 2 miles below the Earth's surface.
Yeah, we had to get Nicolas Cage to guide us there.
The bigger problem was getting out once everyone realised where we were.
Let's wait for that geyser to take us all the way back to the surface, riding a giant tortoiseshell.
I don't know what that is a reference to. Is it Journey to the Centre of the Earth?
It is
Finding
sort of,
Nemo.
yeah. It's kind of Finding Nemo as well, yeah. Highlights. What are our highlights? What have we loved about this? I'll tell you what. I don't know if this. I love listening back and laughing.
Listening back and laughing at Cole laughing. That's
We
what I like
are
doing.
so funny.
Well, it's just like we said the other day. The funniest bit about this podcast is when Carl finds something really funny and he goes, I love that shit.
So I think I haven't got the best memory, and so when I do listen, I genuinely have forgotten what we spoke about. Like I even forget my own examples. Like, what did I say here? And so I do listen as like a new listener, and like some of the episodes, I think the sex special had me in absolute stitches. Yeah, no, I think I've had a lot of laughs with you lads over the last year, so thank you for bringing sunshine and happiness into my life.
Into your otherwise miserable life. No, yeah, it's been great, lads. And this is just the start of a 20-year journey, so start prepping, Liam. Before we begin, I want to make it very clear that we're not really here to solve your life's hardest problems. All of our submissions...
Keep that in.
Thanks, Carl. All of our submissions since a year ago have been certified 100% trivial and or fictional pickles, and our advice should nearly never be followed. So we're really only here to have fun. So if you're having a really hard time, please go to our website for guidance on people who are more equipped than us to help you. That's agonyartpodcast.com. So with that out of the way, let's get on with it. Here is our first problem of today. All the shelves and flat surfaces in my workplace are covered in little sculptures and trinkets. Little decorative items that are supposed to make the place seem cool and trendy. The thing is, one of these little sculptures is part of a series, and it's the only one I need to complete my collection of that series. It's a rare one as well. So rare that I've no idea how they got hold of it. There are so many random things all over the office with no connection to each other and no reason to be there that I'm 100% sure that no one would miss this one if I took it home one day. In fact, that's exactly what I've been considering lately. The only thing that's stopping me is that I know stealing is wrong. Can you give me a good reason why I shouldn't just shove it in my bag one day?
I'll tell you what you are stealing. My time reading this problem.
To be fair, yeah, we had a long problem last week as well. Normally, I try to I'm sorry, listeners, but when you send in your problems, I try to kind of paraphrase to make them a bit shorter. But I think we should allow longer problems because they provide greater context, don't they?
If you could just provide a shorter summary for my benefit.
You know what they say about long problems?
Long solutions.
Yeah,
Is that what they
Big
say?
dicks.
big shoes.
Big shoes.
Basically, Liam, this bloke has seen something at work that he wants to steal because he needs it to complete his collection of, I don't know, Funko Pops, something like that. Other sculptures are available. Other shit plastic toys are available.
So who has a collection?
The collector.
Yeah.
Benicio del Toro.
Benicio. Yeah, all right. Let's call this guy Benicio. So it's been a couple of episodes since we've explained this. So listeners, when you send in a problem, we anonymize you. We don't want you to be identified at work when you're stealing things. So we'll give you a fake name. In this case, we're going to call this person Benicio because he is the collector. So who can help Benicio?
I can help Benicio. Have you seen a film called The Italian Job? I'm going to bet neither of you have seen it.
The remake was on Channel 5, I want to say, the other day.
Yeah, I watched the middle 45 minutes of it.
So did I. I had to go out.
It bears no resemblance to the original from 1969.
Yeah,
it's got
Michael Caine, isn't it?
Yeah, not a lot of people know that.
Well, I was going to talk about the remake, which was Edward Norton.
Yeah, that's right.
Charlize Theron. I love both of those people so much.
Yeah. How do you know so much about it?
Everyone knows about the remake, don't they? Because it was a bit of a flop at the time, wasn't it?
Yeah, 2003 it was.
It was a little bit
decent
shit.
cast. It was a little bit shit, and the only similarities to the Italian Job was Mark Wahlberg, and he goes, they're going, how are we going to get it? And he goes, we'll do it like the Italian Job, which is in minis. They just use minis basically. There's no other. There's gold in it and there's minis. That's about it. But anyway,
Jason Statham's in it, and he has the weirdest accent. I couldn't place it. I don't know if he was trying to do one or not.
Do one.
He tries to do one in the Transporter series, doesn't he? And he's just weird, terrible at it.
International American style thing, yeah.
But anyway, sorry, Carl. Yeah, so you're talking about the original, are you?
The original one, the best. Yeah, directed by Peter Collinson. Same name as the Mark Wahlberg. I can't believe we're like referencing the Mark Wahlberg one as like the as our control.
It was a prequel to the Mark Wahlberg one. Yeah.
It's about our level of culture, isn't it? Really.
Yeah.
So Charlie Croker, played by Michael Caine or Mark Wahlberg, depending on the version you watch. He's putting a crack team together to steal $4 million in gold bullion that's being held in Turin, Italy. Hence the Italian job. Charlie Croker comes out of prison and he's told to, go straight. That's it now. But his friend gets killed by the mafia trying to pull off this Italian job. So he's like, nah, fuck that. One more job. One big job. One last job before I jack it in. So his job needs funding. So he goes to see Mr. Bridger in prison, who's, if you haven't seen this, he's played by Noel Coward. And it's a very kind of, there's a lot of whimsy in it. So Noel Coward is like obsessed with the Queen, and his jail cell is littered with pictures of the Queen. And every time he comes on screen, it's like you hear Rule Britannia play. So he's like a gangster. He funds the Italian job, and so Charlie puts the team together. They've got to take over an armored car, take the gold off, and get away. But they need the armored car to stop, which armored cars don't really stop until they get where they're going. So they 1960s hack the traffic system in Turin with magnets in computers.
Which cutting edge tech back then.
Yeah, which fucks around with the traffic lights, so causing loads of traffic, which allows them to take over the armoured vehicle, get the gold, load it into 3 minis, a red, white and blue one, Royal Britannia.
Where do they get the minis from? Do they import
them? I think they take them with them. It's an interesting point, Liam, because Mini refused to give them any cars to use in the film, so they had to buy their own ones. And being based in Italy, Fiat said, you can have all of our cars and as many as you want. And they were like, no, we really want minis. He was like, no, look, Fiat 500 is just like a mini. So apparently the every other car you see is a Fiat, but the 3 main cars is a mini. And interestingly,
the armoured cars just armoured Fiat 500s.
Yeah, you can only get about 2 people in
them. They also weren't allowed to close any roads because they're driving around Turin like it's real. The authorities refused to allow them to do so. So the mafia really wanted the film made, and so went and closed the roads themselves, basically. So there's a brilliant car chase. Is it a car chase? Yeah. So the 3 minis are getting away with the gold. They explain how minis are going to carry gold. They shed loads of weight so that they can fit the gold in. So they overcome all the odds, the police, the angry mafia.
Are you describing the plot of the Blues Brothers again?
It's very similar, isn't it? Yeah.
So the mafia in the film, are they played by actors or are they played by the real mafia who were there?
Oh, who knows? I don't.
Is that why they wanted the film made? They were getting royalties?
Maybe. Could have been, Liam. So the big famous scene, and whilst they're all escaping, the song "It's a Self-Preservation Society" is playing, iconic. But they load the gold onto a bus. They escape to the Alps, and as they're going around a bend, they lose control, and half of the bus hangs over the edge of the cliff face or the mountainside or whatever, and the gold is on the edge that is hanging over the mountain. Everyone else is on the other side. One of them tries to move, and it starts getting shaking. The gold is stuck, and they're stuck, and they're fucked.
Or are they?
Or are they? It ends there. It ends with Charlie Croker saying, "Don't worry, I've got an idea." He's an ideas man.
That's a great ending, isn't it?
Yeah. So you don't know what happens. And yeah, so my point is, crime doesn't pay.
Is that your point?
So don't do it.
If Benicio pockets this sculpture that he wants to steal from work, he might end up on a cliff, hanging over the edge.
Yeah.
And if he tries to grab the sculpture, he'll fall off.
Exactly. You can't discount that chain of events.
It was gold bullion, wasn't it?
It was gold bullion, yeah.
Is gold magnetic? I don't think it is it?
Are you trying to solve the problem like Charlie Croker?
Well, I was thinking he might, because you said about they use the magnets to hack into computers or something. He might have been thinking about putting the magnets on a stick.
I'm really sorry, Pickles and fellow hosts. I've missed the best line of the film. You see if you can get. I'll tee you up. I'll tee you up. So they've got to work out how to get the gold out of the armored vehicle, and so the explosive guy said, "I can do it." So they're testing it on a van, lining the doors with explosive just to blow the doors off. What does Charlie Croker say when the van explodes?
You were only supposed to get rid of the doors. That's what he says, isn't it? Pretty sure that's right.
Are you joking?
And then Don Cheadle comes in and goes, "They fucking nosed it up."
We're in Barney Rubble. No, of course. And Liam, if you're going to say it, fucking say it. You're only supposed to blow the bloody doors off.
I'm so sorry. Yeah, I think I'm going to discourage this Benicio as well. I know that you're a collector, Benicio, but I'm going to discourage you from stealing to add to your collection. Although Benicio del Toro in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, he's happy to steal to add to that collection, isn't he? He doesn't give a fuck. But anyway, we're not canon here, so I'm going to tell you about The Feather Thief by Kirk Wallace Johnson, which is a book that I read recently. I got it from a book subscription, so it was every month for a year I got sent a different book that I'd never even heard of.
Did you?
They were trying to broaden my horizons.
Did you give up because you couldn't keep up with one book a month?
I'm still reading them now, and the subscription ended I think it ended at the end of 2020. So, yeah. But yeah, The Feather Thief was one of these books, and it's a non-fiction book which tells the story of Edwin Rist, an American who became obsessed with fly tying, which is... Have you heard of fly tying? Do you know what it is?
It's when you get a fly and you tie it to someone and then go, you've been fly tied.
No, it's not. It's it's the art of making artificial flies for use in fly fishing. So, the bait for fish to grab, basically. And they're usually made out of feathers and other equipment.
Time to make an embarrassing admission. I don't know what fly fishing is.
I'm not entirely sure. I think angling, normally you would use something like a worm or whatever, wouldn't you? But with fly fishing, you use a fly.
When's the last time you angled your worm?
A long time ago, Carl. I haven't angled my worm since I lost my helmet. So anyway, Edwin Rist, an American, became obsessed with fly tying, which is the art of making artificial flies for use in fly fishing.
And what is fly fishing?
So they take feathers and they create, intricate... Google it sometime, Liam, and you'll see the intricate little flies they make. Often they're amazing work. And Edwin Rist was amazing at it from a very young age. He became obsessed with it. I think he saw it on the telly one day and he was just like, that looks amazing. I'm going to start doing that. So he asked his dad to buy him some fly fishing, fly tying magazines and stuff, I think. I don't think he even fished. He just liked to tie these flies. Anyway, like a lot of these art forms that wish they were sciences, there's a fair bit of what sounds like bullshit to fly tying theory. Like there are all these different recipes for the feathers you need to use to make these flies to attract certain fish at certain times of day in certain conditions. I'm doing this from memory, and as usual, my memory's terrible. But in the book, I think they gave an example of there was one recipe that was for attracting a salmon that was hiding behind a rock. There's a certain recipe specifically to catch those fish.
The rock's important.
Yeah.
You sent a nice sexy salmon with lipstick, little dress.
Yeah. Now, they're all of these recipes, a lot of them were made up by Victorian, I think they were Victorian, certainly historical idiots who basically seemed to love nothing more than hunting animals to extinction. So a lot of these recipes contain beautiful feathers of really rare birds, like birds of paradise and stuff. And this was during the feather craze anyway, so there was a period in history when it was very fashionable for women to have hats with whole dead birds on top, with wings outspread, and they would be rare birds with beautiful plumage. And the whole point of the hat was to show off, look at this beautiful bird that I have got dead on my hat. So it was like a sick time in history anyway. But
Do you think they said that? What's your
What?
dead bird, Lucinda? Mine's an ostrich.
Exactly. Imagine wearing an ostrich on your head. Fuck, that would be well heavy. So this just added to the problem. They were, hunting these rare birds purely for fashion. Well, another example used in the book is that one vendor sold I think it was a scarf made from 1,000 hummingbird skins.
Fuck,
it's terrible, isn't it? Anyway, yeah. So
I bet that looked nice.
Hummingbirds are
you're evil.
astonishing
You're going
creatures.
straight to hell.
Hummingbirds are
Carl,
amazing.
you're right. I think I read once that if we ate the equivalent of what a hummingbird needs to survive, like for their size, they eat as many calories as if we ate 20,000 calories a day.
Jesus.
For their size, that's how much they need to eat.
How does that translate into pizzas?
Well, a Domino's pizza, a large Domino's pizza, most of them are like 2,000 calories.
So you'd have to have
So
10 a
10
day.
large Domino's pizzas a day.
I reckon if I pace myself, I might be able to do it.
Carl likes to eat double decadence as well, so I imagine they're like 2,500.
Yeah. Some chicken kickers, cookies. It can be done. It can be done. I can be a hummingbird.
Listeners, other pizza joints are available. Okay. Anyway, so where was I? Oh yeah, so these dickheads from the past who didn't, conservation wasn't a massive thing then because they were dickheads. So, you can't completely blame them for the way they acted, but because of the way they acted, they killed off a shitload of birds, and this just added to the problem. So they were writing a load of recipes for, this is a fly that will get trout on a Tuesday or whatever, which is,
bullshit.
Funnily enough, what I often go out to do, get trout on a Tuesday. So they wrote them, there's no scientific basis necessarily. I'm probably going to get a lot of angry emails from fly tyers saying, you need to use these rare bird feathers and stuff. But people still believe it today and they want to use those feathers. And it's like the real thing is obviously now illegal to deal in because some of those birds are extinct and some of them are on the verge of extinction. So, if they allowed people to deal in them, we'd be willfully killing off species. There are these artificial substitutes, but they're not good enough for a lot of modern fly tyers. Many of those will only be happy with the real thing. So, back to this book. To get the real thing, Edwin Rist broke into the Natural History Museum in Tring. I didn't know there was one in Tring. In 2009.
Where's Tring?
Just outside London.
Oh.
And stole hundreds of rare bird skins. I think it was 299 rare bird skins. He shoved them all into a suitcase and climbed out the window. Many of which had been brought to the UK by Alfred Russel Wallace. Do you know who that is?
No.
I didn't know either. And I can't believe that we're not taught about him. He came up with the theory of evolution at the same time, completely independently of Charles Darwin. I nearly thought, wait, Charles Darwin didn't come up with that.
It's like Dennis the Menace all over again.
It is.
Yeah.
Have we spoken about
exactly
Dennis the Menace
yeah.
on the podcast?
We did.
I think we did, yeah. And yeah, so he and Charles Darwin both came up with Dennis the Menace at the same time.
What's more culturally important, Dennis the Menace or the theory of evolution?
I really don't think that you can have the theory of evolution without Dennis the Menace. So
Philosophers have grappled with that one for years, though, haven't
they? So yeah, it's a failing of the education system, in my opinion, that we don't learn about this guy. But many of these were brought back by him. They're so historically important. I'm not going to spoil everything that happened to this guy, Edwin Rist, or how the crime was solved, but I will tell you how the fly tying community reacted, Benicio, when they heard about what he'd done. Now, obviously, as I said, a lot of them want these rare bird feathers because they're rare and beautiful and they can't be bought anywhere else. And if they had a chance to grab some for themselves, a lot of them probably would. In fact, some of them did, because he started selling them on fly tying websites, and a lot of people bought them. But on the whole, these people who had looked up to Edwin for years because he was like a king in their community because he was so good at fly tying, they turned on him and they were disgusted. And his name became a dirty word among the community that he'd once been worshipped by, because they thought he was a proper dickhead for doing something so obviously wrong and bringing their community into disrepute. And he's in the book as well. He still doesn't seem to think that what he did was bad. He's under the impression that these specimens were, gathering dust in the museum and they had no scientific value anymore, which actual scientists don't agree with. But, how do you argue with someone who's been to the University of Facebook? You just can't. And that is my point. Look, after all that, I've literally spent about 15 minutes talking, and I'm so sorry, Liam, you've got 1 minute to do your example, but
Yeah, that's not happening. No way is that happening.
It boils down to, don't be a Moby Dickhead.
Yeah, do not steal. You might think it's fine, that no one's going to notice, and as you say, you think, there's loads of this shit at work. They're not, appreciating it the way I would, but that's not the point. You might be right that they don't appreciate it like you would, but if you steal it, it's possible that everyone you ever loved and looked up to might reject you for turning into a piece of shit thief.
Wanker.
Well, I think we're all in agreement today, because my examples are pretty much kind of highlighting the fact that theft very rarely ends well in the music industry. We've spoken a lot about this before, but it's quite easy to find examples of big hits that ended in lawsuits. I can't think of many episodes where we haven't talked about a music lawsuit, to be honest.
Yeah, it was your thing for a while, wasn't it?
It was. Well, it's making it's coming back in a big way today. So this time, but I mean, those times I wasn't even looking for them and they just cropped up. This time I thought I'd actually look for some of the biggest examples where the crime didn't pay. But I thought before we get started, can either of you think of any?
I thought the law, Anna. The law won.
I was going to say, can you think of any big lawsuits relating to music that we haven't talked about before?
Enya suing P. Diddy and Maria Winans, because they used. Do you know the song "Ready or Not"? You can't have. Yeah,
you can't have.
That's got a bit of Enya on it.
Is it a famous Enya song?
Don't know. Really. Don't think so. No, but then this P. Diddy produced song used it, thinking it was from that, and they didn't credit Enya. Enya was like, "Yo, bitch, that's my tune, man."
That's how Enya speaks.
And so they
I've been working on his Enya impression for years.
Nailed it.
Yeah. So they put her on the song.
I heard that Bittersweet Symphony by The Verve, they didn't seek permission or anything to use that.
Where's it from?
And as a result, they were sued. I can't remember, but they were sued and they lost all royalties to that song forever, basically. They've made no money from that song. And that's probably The Verve's biggest song, isn't it?
And the
song
Except
is
for
that.
maybe The Drugs Don't Work.
Yeah. The music video for Bittersweet Symphony is very, very similar to Massive Attack, Unfinished.
Yeah, you're right.
Sympathy.
Bumping into people and stuff, yeah. So they didn't deserve any money from it then because they stole it all. Sorry, The Verve, you didn't deserve it.
I tell you what, considering that was not prepped at all, I think you two did really well there. So thank you for that.
Well, I had one more as well. Olivia Rodrigo was recently, she didn't, I don't think they sued and I don't think any money changed hands, but there was a lot of outcry about one of her songs sounding a lot like a Paramore song. So in the end, she credited Paramore as a writer as well.
Ah.
Like a lot of your previous examples, basically, if you throw your weight around, then you get credited as a writer, don't you?
Did you know that Sting sang a bit of Money for Nothing that sounded a lot like this?
And
where did you hear that?
If you listen to last week's episode, you can hear the full story. So I'm going to talk about something that has been described as one of the first major plagiarism cases in music.
Oh, Mozart
versus Beethoven.
Yeah.
Not quite that early. So this happened in 1963, and this is the Beach Boys song "Surfin' USA." Brian Wilson of the Beach Boys very naively set out to create a tribute to Chuck Berry's 1958 hit "Sweet Little 16," and the vocal tune and delivery is very, very obviously based on that song, as is the lyrical content. In Keith Badman's 2004, sorry, I couldn't not laugh when I said that. Do you think he's a bad man? I don't
Keith
know.
Badman.
In Keith Badman's 2004 book,
It's Badman.
The Beach Boys. Is it Badman?
Keith
Badman.
Badman.
Sorry, Keith. I'll stop butchering your name. In Keith Badman's 2004 book, The Beach Boys, Brian Wilson is quoted as saying, "I was going with a girl called Judy Bowles, and her brother Jimmy was a surfer. He knew all the surfing spots. And I started humming the melody to Sweet Little 16, and I got fascinated with the fact of doing it. And I thought to myself, God, what about trying to put surf lyrics to Sweet Little 16's melody? The concept was about they're doing this in this city, and they're doing that in that city. So I said to Jimmy, hey, Jimmy, I want to do a song mentioning all the surf spots. So he gave me a list. And that's how Surfing USA came about, apparently.
It sounds quite innocent. Like, obviously, is this before everyone sued the pants off each other?
Well, maybe this is the thing.
Well, it was the first time.
If it really was the first major case, then he probably thought, what's the worst that could happen? But unfortunately, Chuck Berry's publishers weren't quite as happy about this as Brian Wilson might have hoped. And Murray Wilson, who, there's a lot to talk about for Murray Wilson. We're not going to go into it now, but he is the Wilsons' father. So Beach Boys, if you don't know, they're made up of the Wilson brothers, one of their cousins, and one of their friends. And the Wilson dad, Murray Wilson, managed the band. And he was pressured into handing over the copyright before the single was released. So they never made a penny from that song.
That's a real liberty, because Chuck Berry stole his song from Marty McFly.
That is true, when he went back in time. Ironically, when founding Beach Boy member Mike Love took legal action to gain songwriting credits on quite a few Beach Boys songs that he was previously denied, he wasn't able to get credit on Surfing USA because the copyright didn't actually belong to Brian Wilson, who he was suing. So that's kind of interesting. And Chuck Berry has got form, actually, because another song in 1969, Come Together by the Beatles.
Right now. Oh, yeah.
In sweet harmony.
Yeah, that was originally written by the Beatles. Did you know that? So this was another big song that ultimately resulted in a lawsuit, and it was again involving Chuck Berry. So this time, the charge was appropriating a line from You Can't Catch Me, which was released in 1956. The first line in Come Together is, here come old flap top, he come grooving up slowly. And that was the bone of contention. It was very, very similar to a line from You Can't Catch Me, which was something like, here come old flap top, he come moving up on me, or something like that. And allegedly, Paul McCartney suggested that they should slow the track down while they were recording it to make it sound a bit less like that song. But that didn't help, and a lawsuit followed. If you listen to them side by side, they're not really that similar, but I suppose you can imagine if it was a bit faster, it's the same similar sort of chord sequence, and the lyrics are obviously quite similar. But yeah, so there was a lawsuit, and in this case, eventually John Lennon settled out of court, and this is quite interesting. Instead of giving any money, he agreed that he would record 3 songs, which the rights were owned by Big 7 Music, who published You Can't Catch Me. So they were like, you're John Lennon, you're really famous, record 3 of our songs, we'll get loads of money for it, basically. And this turned into a bit of a saga, because he released 2, one of which was You Can't Catch Me. No, it wasn't. Was it? No, yeah, it was. Sorry. And he didn't release the 3rd one. The reason I got confused there is because the album he released it on, I think this is right, also, funnily enough, included the other song we were just talking about that the Beach Boys ripped off, Sweet Little 16, and John Lennon did a version of that as well. But anyway, he released two of the songs, but he didn't release the 3rd one while he was alive. It was released later after he died, but it wasn't released while he was alive. So he was sued again for breach of contract. But it didn't end there. Sorry, I know this is a long story, but it is really interesting. So the publisher representing Big Seven Music, he was a bloke called Maurice Levy, who, by all accounts, he was a bit of a bastard. So he was like involved with organized crime. He was suspected of extortion. He was investigated by the FBI and everything. And he was so angered by John Lennon that he released an album of John Lennon's material without his permission, which resulted in another lawsuit, which John Lennon won and actually made back quite a bit more money than he previously lost. So, long story short, crime doesn't pay, especially if you're stealing from Chuck Berry.
It's funny because, as I say, I normally paraphrase these problems, and this one was quite long, so this one wasn't completely paraphrased, but there was a bit that I cut out. He said, "By the way, I work at Chuck Berry's offices." So you've hit the nail on the head there, Liam.
What's your problem? There's no use trying to pretend you haven't got one. The three of us are here to lend a friendly ear and help you out with all that strife that's lately marked your life. Why not divulge it? You never know, we may have tips that help you solve it. We know it's unlikely, but it's an impossibility if you don't share your problem.
So, problem 2. Last month, I had my 13th birthday. Oh, wait a minute. My voice is a bit too deep for this, isn't it? I think I hit puberty when I was about 17, so... Last month, I had my 13th birthday, and practically overnight, I realised that the world is a cold and unfair place, and no one understands me. I'm feeling feelings I've never felt before, and none of them are positive. What am I supposed to do with all this angst? And how come I'm the first person ever to have felt it? Were you two particularly angsty teenagers?
I don't think so. I was angsty.
I've always been a bit too happy-go-lucky to be
You're
angsty.
so angsty, Liam. My God.
We call you Angsty Liam behind your back.
I just always feel like things are going to be all right, you know? There's no room in my head.
Oh, here we go. Bob Marley's coming in.
Yeah, would you say every little thing?
Every little thing. I did listen to a lot of Bob Marley growing up. Maybe that was it. But yeah, there's never really been any room in my head for, worrying about stuff like that.
Let's call this person Bob then.
Oh, after your intro, I wanted little Timmy that got stuck down the well in The Simpsons.
Oh, yeah. All right, little Bobby. We'll meet
Bobby.
halfway. Well, I'm going to go first, and I'm going to keep it as quick as possible because I took about 15 minutes of the first one, and we time ourselves to try and keep these episodes down to less than 2 hours. So I wish I could talk about The Catcher in the Rye by J.D. Salinger, since Holden Caulfield is like the king of angst. And if you ask people to think of an angsty book character, that's probably the one most people would name. But I've already spoken about Catcher in the Rye in a previous episode, so I'm not going to do that again. You could also read any amount of young adult fiction, because basically young adult fiction is just dripping with pathetic and annoying whiners. You could read The Hunger Games, Twilight, anything like that. It's basically just teenage girls saying, "My life is so hard being a teenage girl. I look so average, but I'm also beautiful because two handsome teenage boys are fighting over me."
That comes straight from Aaron's diary from when he was 16.
That does, actually. And another thing that's really angsty is Less Than Zero by Bret Easton Ellis. I really loved that one back when I was an angsty teenager, so you could try that, little Bobby. But the main thing I'm going to talk about is On the Road by Jack Kerouac. Now, in that, Sal Paradise is a boring idiot devoid of any personality, and he meets a bloke called Dean Moriarty and basically falls in love with him and goes on some road trips with him. And I can't really remember what happened because I read it ages ago, but it was like I spoke about last week, how, there are classics that people absolutely fucking love. And you go, all right, then, yeah, I've got to read that because people love it. But when I read it, I was so disappointed. an extract of my Instagram review that I wrote from 2019 when I read it. I called it boring, shallow, insubstantial drivel with characters in a permanent state of arrested development and concepts that might be thought deep by 12-year-olds, hipsters, or that fearful combination of the two, 12-year-old hipsters. So, as you can tell, I liked it. But what I do remember about it is it's just so angsty. So, Little Bobby, basically what I'm saying is feed that angst monster inside you. You're not going to be a teenager for long. You know, you're going through changes and stuff. I'm going through changes. I hope that's Liam's example. Just, you know, feed that angst monster and read some angsty teenage literature and just enjoy it. And then one day you'll grow out of it. And I mean, On the Road by Jack Kerouac is considered one of the best examples of beat literature, which is characterized by sexual liberation, experimentation with drugs, rejection of economic materialism. So, you know, basically sticking it to the man and not doing your homework. So you could read any of the beat writers, really.
So that's not my example, because I'm going a bit more left field again now. And instead of recommending a song, I'm going to recommend an entire genre, if you can imagine such a thing. But I'm going to do it in a classic Liam way that takes about 20 minutes. So,
oh fuck!
when I first read through this problem, I did think back to my own kind of childhood, and while I wasn't very angsty myself, I did enjoy listening to some angsty music. And there was a lot of, I don't know what the correct term for it was, but I'm going to call it like maybe post-punk or skate punk. I'm thinking about bands like, you know, Blink-182, Sum 41, where...
Isn't it pop punk?
Pop punk, yeah, that's another one. I think that's kind of a very similar genre, isn't it? Yeah, could be that. And I remember listening to that music and really enjoying it, and I was thinking, oh, I could recommend kind of this sort of music. And then I thought, hang on a minute, why don't I follow this to its logical conclusion, and rather than talking about post-punk, talk about actual punk. So this is what we're going to explore here. So in the 70s, around the mid-70s, this kind of really hit the mainstream, and people really started properly expressing their unhappiness through the medium of music to mainstream audiences. I mean, it's generally agreed that punk was around before the mid-70s, but it was more of an underground culture. So it started at some point in the late 60s. There were a lot of groups that people now call proto-punk. People like Lou Reed and the Velvet Underground, Iggy Pop and the Stooges, who were around in like the late 60s, early 70s. And they kind of paved the way for punk, but their music isn't quite the same, is the general gist of it. But around 1975, or 1976, I should say, punk really hit the mainstream with two huge acts, one in the US and one in the UK, the Ramones in the US and the Sex Pistols in the UK. And I was quite surprised when I heard this, because obviously I know who the Sex Pistols are, but I didn't think they were, you know, that influential. But according to everything you read online, they are one of the biggest kind of, you know, punk bands, and they kind of started things.
God Save the Queen, all that.
Exactly. So we'll come to that in a sec. Their background is actually quite interesting in itself. It starts with a British businessman named Malcolm McLaren, who owned a record/clothing shop in Chelsea. And he was assisted in the clothing department by a lady you might have heard of named Vivienne Westwood. Ooh. And her name would later be synonymous with kind of punk and new wave fashion. I didn't know that about Vivienne Westwood. I didn't know much about her, to be honest. But...
I've got a Vivienne Westwood cake slice.
Is it very punk?
It's punky.
It does not cut any cakes because it just will not.
No, it refuses.
So the two of them went to New York, where McLaren managed.
It's Vera Wang. Sorry.
Close.
It was the V's, wasn't it?
It was.
You heard a V and you were like...
Close down V's again.
So when they were in New York, McLaren managed this proto-punk band called the New York Dolls for a brief period. And they returned to London after that in 1974. And a local three-piece punk band known as The Strand were very excited to meet him, because he'd managed the New York Dolls in America. And they're like, oh, we love them. Yeah, we want to meet you. Can you manage us? And he accepted eventually. They asked him a few times and he finally accepted. And he was quite brutal at first. He got rid of their guitarist, a bloke called Wally Nightingale, immediately because he didn't fit the image. And
You mean Wally didn't fit the punk scene?
Everyone thinks it's because he had these like pretty large glasses, and they were like, "You are not punk. Get out."
Stripy jumper. Everyone's looking for him everywhere.
Where's Wally? Anyway, McLaren proceeded to recruit the rest of the band members from people that he found in his shop. So Glenn Matlock was a shop assistant who was brought in on guitar, and John Lydon, or Johnny Rotten, as he's kind of more popularly known, was just a customer of the store who came in one day and they were like, yeah, he looks good, he fits the image. And by that point, the shop's clothing had involved a lot of S&M and fetish wear, so they renamed it to Sex, and the band's name, the Sex Pistols, derives from there. So anyway, they caused quite a bit of a stir at the time. There'd never really been much like it in the mainstream media in the UK. Carl, you were talking about God Save the Queen. That was the second single released in 1977. And that was them, obviously lashing out at the glorification of the monarchy and the disparity in wealth when compared with the working class. And pretty much all radio stations, even the independent ones, flat out refused to play it. They were like, you can't say that about the Queen. We're not playing that. So
she ain't no human being.
She's a runner bean.
So it is.
No, that's just always what I say because I'm stupid.
Outrageous.
Other classic punk acts of the era include The Clash, obviously, you'll have heard of. And although it came a bit later in 1979, The Clash's 10th single, London Calling, points out a lot of things that lyricist Joe Strummer thought were wrong with the world. And this one actually led to some real positive change. So in London Calling, he sings, London is drowning and I live by the river. And he was, of course, referring to the genuine flood risk that London has always faced and had always faced up till that point. And
you're not about to say, are you, that they built the Thames Barrier because of London Calling?
Well, it's
Someone
funny you
listened to
should say that.
I think you said
Someone
that.
listened to that and went, good point.
In
He lives by the
1982,
river.
in 1982, 3 years later, the Thames Barrier was installed. And the fact that it was already under construction when he wrote the song is completely irrelevant. So, there you have it.
Jesus
Raise your
Christ.
voice, speak out, listen to some punk music, and you could
Be
make a real
angsty.
positive impact to the flood risk in your local area.
Oh, that was a long walk for a small drink of water, Liam.
Literally water.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting that you should mention angsty teen literature, Aaron, because that often is translated into angsty teen cinema. And I'm going to talk about Twilight, which I would say is probably the angstiest of teen movies.
Yeah.
In terms of...
I'd never seen that level of angst, and I was actually quite drawn to it when I first watched it, because I've always been quite cynical about that stuff.
Yeah.
Like proper angsty young adult stuff. But I wanted to watch it again as soon as I'd finished it, because I was like, I've never experienced this level of angst. I love it.
Well, I owe a shout out to twilightlexicon.com, which has written down an entire timeline of all the films.
That
the
sounds
point-
like something from the dark web, twilightlexicon.com.
Yeah, it's weird, isn't it? Yeah. But shout out to those guys. So Twilight, the series, is 2008 to 2012. Films come out. Who wrote the books, Aaron? Suzanne
Meyer.
Yeah, that's it.
Maya.
I thought
now
it was
this timeline-
Stephanie Meyer.
Stephanie Meyer.
Meyer.
We got mixed up, didn't we, Carl? Because of
Yeah.
Suzanne Collins, who wrote Hunger
Hunger
Games.
Games. Yeah, there you go. Imagine if they
What I mean.
morphed into one super angsty teen novel.
Yeah, the Hunger Twilights.
The Twilight.
Could
Hunger.
have gone
Games,
with the
that
Twilight
was-
games, yeah.
Fuck.
It'd just be baseball, which they seem to play in Twilight for some reason.
Yeah.
So, did you know the Twilight timeline stretches between 2500 BC and 2007? Now, if you're scrolling through the timeline, you've probably got, 20 entries for years between 2500 BC and 2005.
Yeah.
That impresses me, to be honest.
One bullet point per entry per year that something happened. Get to 2005, and there's 21 entries between January and March. This seems to be
So you're saying it's not a rich and detailed history? It's
Well,
just-
no, I'm saying that vampire lore really kicks off in 2005. This is when things start happening.
Even though the real vampire lore, the one that everyone, basically it's canon,
Yeah.
Buffy the Vampire Slayer, began in 1999. So you'd expect quite a lot of bullet points around then.
Yeah, nothing, though.
But no.
Nothing. Didn't even say
Not even a mention of
Buffy's
Buffy.
born. Yeah. So anyway, I'll get like, and when I thought, oh, I've got to use Twilight because Bella is the angstiest teen going.
Yeah.
I started thinking she might have been, I don't know if I'm using the right terminology, catfished or maybe groomed. Groomed is probably the right word, because like it starts with she meets Edward on 18th of January 2005. Edward says to her, "Your blood is like heroin to me."
Yeah.
And then on the
It's all pretty fucking weird.
yeah. 2nd of March, Edward spends the night in Bella's room without her knowing. Like, Jesus Christ. Things really hot up on the 5th of March when Bella meets Jacob for the first time. And obviously Jacob forms the love triangle with Edward and Bella.
The heroin drug ring.
4 days later, Bella and Edward are official as a couple. And then on the 13th, which is a Sunday, Edward introduces Bella to his family. And they have the baseball game. And then Bella tells her father she's leaving Forks, which is the town they're in. We've gone from 18th of January, they meet, to the 13th of March, she's leaving the whole town with him.
So where does Cedric Diggory fit into the Twilight universe? I never understood that.
When he gets killed by the Death Eaters. No, by Voldemort.
Oh, they bring him back as a vampire.
They bring him back as a vampire, yeah. That's the origin story of Twilight. That's what happens in 2500 BC. When Harry Potter's set.
3 days after she decides to leave with Edward, it says James tricks Bella into running away with him. Bella nearly dies, and Edward is forced to drink her blood to save her from becoming a vampire. On the 18th, 2 days later, Friday, Bella awakens in hospital with multiple injuries. The first 3 months of their courtship has been fucking eventful, to say the least. We fast forward to September, and on the 13th of September is Bella's 18th birthday. They have a party at the Cullens. Bella cuts her arm and causes a riot.
It's the heroin again, isn't it?
Edward takes her home and stays with her through the night. I bet you did, Edward. And right, so you go from that to on the 14th, Edward is distant and refuses to stay with Bella at night. On the 15th, Edward avoids Bella, and Bella is this is the angstiest thing in the whole series. On the 15th of September, Thursday, Edward avoids Bella, and Bella works on her scrapbook.
Can we do a feature-length episode of Carl reacting to the Twilight lore?
Yeah.
Well, I'm nearly done anyway, but
Twilight, I think it was the second one. It's the second one where he moves away.
yeah, this is New Moon, yeah.
And she's having
Yeah,
an
well,
absolute meltdown.
On the
because she
16th
cannot
of
handle-
September, Edward tells Bella that he and his family are leaving Forks and Bella forever. Bella goes into some sort of shock. A tracking party finds Bella nearly comatose.
I just did not approve of the second one. This is the first time that I felt that kind of old man anger at young person stuff. Because I was just like,
Old man yells at Cloud.
Yeah, I was like, this is so inappropriate. Teaching teenage girls who love Twilight that this is the way to react when your boyfriend dumps you, basically.
You mean
she like tombstones, doesn't she? She jumps off a cliff to try and get his attention.
Spending the 16th of September to December, 3 months, Bella exists in a zombie-like state, only doing the bare minimum needed to really survive.
Fucking hell. Absolutely ridiculous.
To be fair, you weren't that old either, were you? So it's just
No,
it's not old
exactly.
man
We
outrage.
were
It's
like-
just standard outrage.
Yeah.
Yeah, we were like 20 at the time. It was old man because I was like, what about the teenage girls? Won't someone think of the children?
So after this point, I couldn't bring myself to read any more Twilight timeline, so I skipped forward to the end, and on the 1st of January 2007, they get married, Edward and Bella. So this is 2 years later. Bella lowers her mind shield and allows Edward to read it for the first time.
Lowers her mind shield.
How did she develop her mind shield?
I think things would have gone a lot easier if she didn't have a mind shield up on the first day. And Edward read her mind and thought, you know what? No. Go with Jacob, the werewolf.
Yeah, honestly, you can have her because she is absolutely far too much work.
Yeah. So I think you'll find if you watch this, little Bobby, that you're not feeling these things yourself. It's not just you, and you'll probably realise that they're not as bad as they could be if there are werewolves and vampires involved.
Yeah. Thank your lucky stars that it's only puberty that you've got to deal with. Your problems don't go back to 2500 BC. What it reminded me of that you might both be familiar with is, do you remember the Harry Enfield character, Kevin?
Yeah.
Of Kevin and Perry fame, obviously. There was the first episode of Harry Enfield and Chums, I think, is when Kevin turns 13.
Yeah.
And as a 12-year-old, just before midnight, he's jumping up and down on the chairs. He's all excited. I can't wait for my birthday.
Thank you, Mother. Thank you, Father.
Yeah. And then he just transforms. Oh, I hate you. It's so unfair.
That is a great shout.
I love Harry Enfield.
Can you help me with my problem? I think that it might be a long shot. My problem is, you see, that no one believes that I am not a robot. Executing procedure. Problem solving.
Right, yeah, let's go.
I'm excited about next episode because I've used my 1001 songs you must hear before you die book for the first time.
All right, well, let's get the third problem out of the way quickly
so we
then.
can get onto it.
The other day, I tripped over because I'd just tied my own feet together by their shoelaces. After I'd picked myself up off the ground, something hit me that probably should have hit me years ago. I am stupid. I'm so stupid, I tried to put my M&Ms in alphabetical order. Can you recommend some art that will make me more cleverer? Do you two ever feel stupid? I often think, to be fair, I don't feel stupid necessarily, but quite often I think I'm not well read enough. Like, I would like to be one of those people that's very impressive and well read and stuff. And I often think you're not one of those people and you need to work on it. But I've never done any work on it, so here I am.
I feel the same. I always feel like, well, one of my biggest problems, in my head at least, is that I cannot express myself. Even when I'm trying to express that I cannot express myself, I don't really do a great job of it.
Liam, you should sing
Liam, I don't know what you're trying to
say. I hear you, Aaron, but then you also are very well read. Like, if you think of the average person book reading, this isn't a clever sentence.
Carlos trouble expressing himself as well.
Maybe it's the people you surround yourself with make you feel stupider.
Well, when I'm hanging out with people like you and Liam, Carl, I'm going to feel stupid, aren't I?
Well, if we had to rank...
because I'd have to be stupid to be friends with you.
I saw a quote that I really liked, and I can't remember who it was attributed to, but it was something along the line... I'm going to have to paraphrase because I can't remember it word for word. It's something along the lines of, if you ever find that you're the smartest person in the room, then you need to find another room.
Yeah, I think that's probably right.
That's good. Yeah.
So what should we call this person? Who's very clever or who is not very clever? Harry and Lloyd. Dumb and Dumber. Let's call him Lloyd.
I can help Lloyd out. So, to be honest, I'm not really a fan of labeling people as stupid in general, because I think we all have moments, like we've just mentioned, where we don't think properly or we do stupid things. But I don't think that means we should write ourselves off as unsalvageable morons, you know? But even if that isn't true.
But you, Lloyd, are unsalvageable.
But what I was going to say was, even if that isn't true, and you are an unsalvageable moron, maybe that's not so bad. Are either of you familiar with Neil Innes?
Oh yeah.
Old Neil, yeah. No,
I don't know if
never heard
I'm
of him.
butchering his last name or not, but that was what I got from the Wikipedia phonetic pronunciation. He was an English comedian and musician. He's dead now, but he wasn't when he was alive. Among a few other ventures.
You're so good at facts, Liam.
I know. Among a few other ventures, he did a lot of work with Monty Python, who you've probably heard of. If you're familiar with Monty Python and the Holy Grail, he wrote some of the original songs in it, like Brave Sir Robin and Knights of the Round Table. Brave Sir Robin is a personal favourite of mine. There was also a musical documentary film made about him in 2008 called The Seventh Python. So, this isn't just something that he was like, oh yeah, I was working with Monty Python. They really considered him as like a member of the group and all that. Anyway, in 1973, Neil Innes released a song called How Sweet to Be an Idiot from the album of the same name. And this song is it's a nice little ditty about how nice it must be to be dim. So here's a lyric for you. How sweet to be an idiot and dip my brain in joy. Children laughing at my back with no fear of attack, as much retaliation as a toy. And then later he says, I tiptoe down the street, smile at everyone I meet. It's a really nice little song. Doesn't it sound lovely? And it's really nicely instrumented. It's just him and like this nice little piano. And yeah, there's a bit in the middle that's like talks about asylums and stuff, and it gets a bit dark, but you can just kind of skip that part. So it's a really nice song, and it would be a little bit remiss of me not to mention that there was a lawsuit involved in this song. So this occurred when...
Oh, Liam and his lawsuits. Musical lawsuits.
Attorney at musical law. So this occurred when Oasis released their single Whatever in 1994, which I'm assuming you know.
Yeah. Whatever. We're meant to be together.
Sunshine.
Whatever you want. Whatever you like.
So Whatever.
Whatever
Whatever actually has exactly the same tune. So Neil Innes' song goes, how sweet to be an idiot, and Whatever goes, I'm free to be whatever I. And that was the basis on which they were sued. And Neil Innes has a credit on that song, Whatever by Oasis, of course.
Do they get money as well as a credit on a song? I'll be pissed off if I just got, all right, you can be a credit on it.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure they get royalties for the.
Yeah, I would imagine that entitles you to a certain amount of royalties. Yeah. I imagine.
The point of the Neil Innes song is this: ignorance is bliss, and if you really are an idiot, which I don't think you are, by the way, Lloyd, but if you are, then just do you, and as long as you're happy, that's all that matters, surely.
Yeah, that's fair enough, Liam. That's not bad advice.
The obvious film example of this is Forrest Gump, 1994, directed by Robert Zemeckis. I love this film. I don't know about you guys.
Yeah, it's great. I was going to suggest Forrest as the name, but I'm glad I didn't now.
Yeah, I'm glad you didn't. Forrest he's born with like a disability that makes him hard. It makes him he finds it difficult to understand things going on around him and express himself and communicate. And he can't walk, so he's got like braces on his legs. And then like there's the most famous scene is where he's running away from bullies. And he breaks the braces off and he runs away. And then he becomes like a brilliant runner. He goes, I ran everywhere. Because, like, he's just appreciating being able to run. So, he and that kind of starts his journey. Actually, when he's got the braces on, he can't walk funny. And Elvis Presley is in his mum's guest house. And he's like playing a little song. And he's going, do that crazy walk you just did there. And he basically invents Elvis Presley's signature dance where he like shakes his legs.
Yeah.
But
it was confusing watching this as a kid because I might have been a stupid kid. I'm not sure. But I was watching it thinking, how much of this stuff, like when they show the footage where they've spliced him in of like real historical events.
Yeah.
How did they do that? Was he actually there? Is this a true story? Just as a kid, just so confused.
Well, it's the same, yeah.
Tom Hanks has been preparing for that role since the 60s.
Yeah.
So then after he regains the use of his legs, he becomes an all-American football player and gets to meet the president, JFK. He meets his president a few times. Is that one where he drinks all the Dr. Pepper and he goes, "How does it feel to be an all-American?" And he goes, "I need to pay for the president." He fights in Vietnam and he saves a lot of his soldiers while he gets injured in the process. And he gets a Congressional Medal of Honor. There's a really sweet bit where in Vietnam he thinks they're just looking for one guy called Charlie because they called the Viet Cong Charlie, didn't they?
Mm.
So
I remember.
He's like, "We look for Charlie everywhere." After he gets injured and the Vietnam War's over, he becomes a ping pong player and he visits the land of China and he plays ping pong for the US. Again, meeting the president. When he gets back, he's on TV on a. I'm trying to remember the name of the talk show. It's like a famous talk show host, and John Lennon's on there, and a friend of the show. We talked about John Lennon previously.
Yeah.
He inspires John Lennon's lyrics to Imagine, because he goes, "In China they don't have very much." He goes, "No possessions," and then he goes, "And they don't believe in God." He goes, "No religion too." He's responsible for uncovering the Watergate scandal when he goes for his run. So when Jenny leaves him, he just starts running. Remember that bit? He goes, I just started running. And he runs across all America.
Grows a big beard, doesn't he?
He does. And then on his way, people ask him to help him with problems. And like he runs through like poo or shit. And you hear a big squelch, and a guy say to him, "I just can't think of a good idea for a bumper sticker." And he goes, "Oh, you just ran through a huge pile of shit." He goes, "It happens," and then the shit happens. Bumper sticker is born. And then a similar thing, a guy can't think of a good idea for a T-shirt, so Forrest Gump uses a T-shirt to wipe his muddy face, and there's a smiley face on it, and then the yellow smiley face is invented. He founds Bubba Gump Shrimp, and at the end, despite the shit that Jenny put him through, he's got a lovely, clever little boy called Baby Forrest, played by Haley Joel Osment, who grew up to see dead people.
I don't know that.
Poor sod.
You know, what a rich and brilliant life.
Mm.
And he, by his own admission, he's not a smart man, but he managed to have a great life and experienced a lot of things. So I don't think it matters how clever you are. Just be who you are, just like Forrest. People would say to Forrest, "Are you stupid or something?" And he would say, "Stupid is as stupid does." I don't know what that means exactly,
but that idea of a character who lived through lots of historical moments, I think it's been used a few times, hasn't it? Because there's that book, The 100-Year-Old Man Who Climbed Out the Window and Disappeared, is it called? I remember reading that, and that was like part, I was about to say biography. It's not true, obviously, but it kind of talks a lot about of his life as he's going through his adventure. And like it turned out that he was working on like the nuclear bomb and stuff like that. And he met Stalin and things like that. And I think it's been used a few times. It's quite interesting. I quite enjoy those sorts of stories.
Well, I really liked Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter, the book. I think the film got panned, but the book, it was really clever because the concept of the book is that in secret, as well as being, the historical figure that we know, behind the scenes, Abraham Lincoln was hunting vampires. And he weaves it in and out of real historical events. Like, I couldn't attend that event because I had to, I was injured from my vampire hunt or whatever. I can't remember exactly,
That was brilliant, yeah. I like that.
But yeah, it's so cleverly done. And when it is well done, like it was in Forrest Gump and stuff like that, it does become like a something that makes the story better, doesn't it? Because you go, "Oh, they're so clever. You've worked that into the story."
Yeah.
Yeah. And to be honest, you've both made me feel quite bad because what you're basically saying is, even if you are stupid, if you're happy, it doesn't matter.
And you're about to say, "Don't be so fucking stupid."
And I'm about to actually answer their question and recommend some art that might make them cleverer.
What a bastard.
Yeah, what an arsehole. So here goes, Lloyd. So last week, obviously, I talked about, how big, heavy classics and reading stuff like Ulysses makes some people feel very clever. So you could try that. But I won't recommend that, to be honest, Lloyd, because as I said last week, if you read a load of them and start bragging about how much you understood Ulysses, you're going to sound like a twat. So that's not my recommendation. As I said earlier, I'm always very impressed when people seem to know a lot about a broad range of subjects because they seem so well read. Basically, they seem to have read a shitload of books on a shitload of subjects. They're not necessarily experts in one field. It's just they're very well read. They've got a variety of knowledge. So I'm going to, my recommendation basically is that you read a load of non-fiction books from just random areas of life, random subjects. And if you read a load of books from a wide range of subjects, you'll broaden your horizons and this is where I'm out of order, the capacity of your brain. So, obviously, we've talked probably 3 or 4 times now about Factfulness by Hans Rosling, one of my favourite non-fiction books I've ever read. Just amazing. Yeah, really good. And earlier this episode, I recommended a non-fiction book, The Feather Thief by Kirk Wallace Johnson. I'll mention that today. Apparently, I was going through my Goodreads read list to see what non-fiction books I've really loved, because as we've discussed a million times, my memory is terrible. So I was trying to refresh my memory, and on there is A Little History of Philosophy by Nigel Warburton, which I rated 4 stars. And even reading that, I couldn't remember reading it.
Is that by Nigel Warburton, the famous baker?
Yeah, he wrote it on a bit of bread, which might be why I don't remember it, because I must have eaten the bread afterwards.
I was going to say I can recommend some non-fiction books as well, but have you got more to say?
Yeah, I've got shitloads more. Shut the fuck up. John Ronson, all of John Ronson's books are amazing. They're very light, so it's not heavy. So even if you are a little bit stupid, Lloyd, you will get them. So You've Been Publicly Shamed. I've talked about that on the podcast before. The Psychopath Test, great. But as I say, I've talked about all of those things before, or I don't remember reading them, like A Little History of Philosophy. So one that I do remember reading, and again, one of my favourite non-fiction books ever, is The Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks by Rebecca Skloot. It's about a woman called Henrietta Lacks and the immortal cell line, HeLa, which was taken from her cervical cancer cells in 1951. And I believe those cells are still alive today and still contributing to cancer research. Amazing book, and it's been adapted into a film starring Oprah Winfrey, which I haven't seen. And another one, again, I just thought it was amazing. The Big Short by Michael Lewis. It's about the housing bubble, which caused the financial crash of the 2000s. Fantastic book, really interesting, and you don't have to be a finance expert to get it, but at the end of it, you'll feel like a finance expert. And again, it was adapted into a film starring Christian Bale, Steve Carell, Ryan Gosling, Brad Pitt, Margot Robbie, Selena Gomez, Anthony Bourdain. Brilliant book, and that's as many non-fiction books as I can remember reading. What were yours, Liam? What are your favourite non-fiction books?
I've got a couple. So Sapiens by Yuval Noah Harari, which is...
I've heard so much about that. Yeah,
really good. It's like a history of humankind, and there's also quite a lot of kind of philosophy in it and ideas about where we might be heading in the future. Why We Sleep by Matthew Walker, which is basically a history of sleep science and all the kind of latest theories and or things we know about what sleep actually does, what dreams are about, and that sort of thing. And I mean, I don't know. I think that book changed my life. My wife will probably disagree with you. She'll say I always slept all the time anyway. But it's one of those things where I read it and I was like, oh my God, this is something I've been like completely underestimating the importance of my entire
I've never
life.
slept before. Why have I never slept?
I'm trying to think of others, but you've mentioned quite a few that I've read, so that's probably it for now.
So, Lloyd, we're running out of time, so I'll cut us off there. But we've given you a shitload of non-fiction books there if you do want to expand your horizons. But you don't necessarily need to, because as Liam and Carl told you, it's not all that bad being a little bit stupid. We are all a little bit stupid sometimes. So, lads, we forgot to do this last week, and our listeners have been complaining ever since. We've got a level of outrage from our listeners that has only been equalled by when Jurgen was kicked off of Bake Off earlier this year.
Spoiler.
Did you not know that, Carl?
I did not
Have you not
know
caught
that.
up?
Oh,
fuck.
no. That's a proper
Carl?
spoiler as well.
My wife has moved out. I haven't watched it.
Oh, Carl, I'm so sorry.
That is an outrage. I'm not watching now anyway. Fuck it.
But anyway, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry, Carl. I didn't mean to do that.
Shake this for Hollywood.
Yeah.
Shall we?
I'm sorry. I feel
worry.
really bad now.
Don't worry, don't feel
Shall we
bad.
satisfy
Fucking
the
box.
outraged listeners then and actually recommend something from last week and this week?
So I'll finish my sentence then. So we didn't do it last week, but we're going to do it this week. We normally recommend, if you're only going to listen to or read or watch one thing from this episode, what would it be? But this week, we're going to say one thing from this week and one thing from last week. Quick as we can. Liam, go.
Right. So one thing from last week. You know what? Why don't you watch Dexter's Lab? Bloody love Dexter's Lab.
Oh, yeah.
And
Quick as you can, Liam. Go.
Yeah.
one thing. Sorry, I'm just reading through what I've suggested this week. One thing from this week. Oh dear. Oh, rah, 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 rah. Yeah. All right. How Sweet to Be an Idiot by Neil Innes, because it's a nice little song.
Carl?
I'm going to go Dread from last week, and this week it has to be Forrest Gump.
Forrest Gump is great. Last week, I didn't actually recommend any art that I like. I talked about Wattpad, and I said it was full of shit writing. And I talked about Ulysses and slagged that off for a whole problem. and then I talked about the Rosie Project, which, to be fair, I haven't even read. My wife's read it, and she said it was really good. So for the sake of recommending something, I will recommend The Rosie Project by Graham Simpson. And this week, without question, I mean, as I said, all of the non-fiction books that I recommended are like among my favourite non-fiction books that I've ever read. So they're all brilliant, but because it's so fresh in my memory, The Feather Thief by Kirk Wallace Johnson is just a must-read. I hadn't even heard of it. I never knew it existed until I received it from this book subscription, and I fucking loved it. It was a real page-turner. I finished it in a month. Which is startlingly fast for me. So that's all we've got time for today. Check out the episode notes or agonyartpodcast.com to find links to all the media we mentioned today, and for a link to the Agony Art Spotify playlist where you can listen to all the songs. If you've got a problem you'd like us to attempt to solve, you can reach us on our group Instagram and Twitter accounts at Agony Art Podcast or on the submissions page on our website. Now, we're reaching the end of Series 1.
2.
Reaching the end of Series 2, rather. And we haven't been commissioned for Series 3 yet, so we're not sure if we will get to your problem. But maybe just getting it off your chest will do anyway, even if we never return. So you please send in your problems anyway, and if we can get around to them, we will. But in the meantime, I'd like to thank our resident Agony Aunts for their contributions. Thanks, Liam. Thanks, Carl.
And thank you.
Thank you very much.
And thank you, Pickles, for listening. We'll be back next week with more problems to muddle our way through and more entertainment for you to check out. Bye, 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 bye.
Bye.
But I'd suggest keep it light, 'cause their advice can be shite, and they won't be held liable. Oh no, not at all, not here at Agony Art.